Daniel Reed noticed the smell first. Something burning, sharp and wrong. He stopped mid-stride in the corridor, his hand automatically reaching for the radio clipped to his vest. Around him, the usual hum of Trading Station Harmony. 7 continued. Aliens of a dozen species moved past, some glancing at him with the usual mix of caution and dislike. He was used to that look by now. The alarm came 3 seconds later. Not the polite beeping of a drill, but a shrieking wail that made his teeth ache. Red lights flooded the corridor, spinning shadows across the walls. The crowd around him shifted from orderly to chaotic in a heartbeat. A group of insectoid quillers scattered in 6 different directions. 2 tall Valorians, bird-like beings with iridescent feathers, grabbed their shopping parcels and ran toward the nearest shelter signs that Daniel's radio crackled to life. All security personnel, this is command. We have a critical coolant leak in Sector 9. Toxic gas spreading to adjacent areas. Full station evacuation ordered. I repeat, full evacuation. His training kicked in before his brain caught up. Daniel started moving against the flow of panicked civilians, checking doorways, scanning for anyone who might need help. Most species here were faster than humans, better adapted to crisis. They didn't need him. Usually he reached the residential quarter as the crowd thinned. This section should have been empty already. The evacuation protocol was clear, everyone knew the routes. But Daniel had learned during his 2 years on the station that protocols and reality rarely matched perfectly. The nursery door caught his eye because it was still sealed. The little viewing window showed lights on inside, but the entrance remained locked. His stomach dropped. He ran to it, pressed his face against the thick glass point. 3 small shapes huddled in the center of the room. Hatchlings, Valorian babies, barely bigger than his 2 fists put together. Their tiny beaks opened and closed in distress, calls he couldn't hear through the reinforced door. Downy gray feathers covered their bodies, not yet the brilliant colors they would develop as adults. Daniel yanked out his radio. Command, this is Reed. I've got 3 juveniles trapped in Nursery 7B. The door's sealed, and I can't override it from here. Static answered him. Then a crackling voice, barely audible. Reed, negative on rescue attempt. Gas levels rising in that sector. Evacuation route Delta is compromised. Get to the nearest shelter now. That's an order. He looked through the window again. The hatchlings had noticed him. They pressed together tighter, their fear obvious even across species lines. To them, he was a predator, a death worlder, something their parents had probably warned them about in whatever way Valorians taught their young. Daniel checked his security override pad. The nursery door had a manual release, but triggering it would set off secondary alarms and potentially trap him inside if the corridor outside became compromised. Protocol said leave them. Protocol said 1 human life wasn't worth risking when the babies might already be doomed anyway. But he thought about the apartment fire in Seattle. 7 years ago, a different life. The building collapse that happened while he was still trying to reach the upper floors. The sounds that still woke him some nights. The faces of the families afterward. His hands moved before he finished the thought. The override code punched in, the manual release engaged. The door hissed open and acrid smoke immediately rolled into the nursery. Daniel lunged inside and slapped the emergency seal. The door crashed shut behind him with a finality that made his heart race. The hatchlings screamed. High-pitched, terrified sounds that made something in his chest tighten painfully. They scrambled away from him, climbing over each other to get to the far corner of the room. Their talons scraped against the smooth floor, unable to find purchase. Hey, it's okay, Daniel said, knowing they couldn't understand his words but hoping his tone might help. He stayed low, made himself as small as possible, moved slowly. The air in here was better than the corridor, but he could see yellow mist seeping through the ventilation grates near the ceiling. They had minutes, maybe less. He tried the internal comm panel. Dead. The backup power had failed. His radio produced only static now, the station systems failing one by one. Through the small window, he could see the corridor filling with that yellow fog. No one was coming. No one even knew he was here. Daniel pulled off his jacket and moved toward the hatchlings. They pressed themselves against the wall, making themselves as small as possible. Their little eyes, far too intelligent for babies, tracked his every movement. One of them opened its beak in a threat display that would have been adorable if the situation wasn't so desperate. The temperature was already dropping. He could see his breath now. The station's climate control was failing along with everything else, and this section was designed for Valorian comfort levels, which meant cool even on a good day. 4 cold-blooded babies without their parents' body mass. This would be fatal long before the gas got them. Daniel sat down slowly, several feet away from the terrified hatchlings. He could try to grab them, but they would fight and hurt themselves in their panic. He needed them to choose him, somehow, to trust him just enough that, he did the only thing he could think of. He started to hum, an old tune his mother used to sing, something about stars and sailing. The hatchlings stopped moving, their heads tilted in that peculiar bird-like way, confused by the soft sound coming from the predator. The cold came faster than Daniel expected. Within 20 minutes, frost began forming on the metal walls of the nursery. His fingers felt stiff, clumsy, but that wasn't what worried him. The 3 hatchlings had stopped moving almost entirely. They huddled together in their corner, their small bodies pressed tight, but their eyes were glazing over. He recognized the signs from his emergency training. Torpor. Their metabolism was shutting down to conserve energy, that if they went fully dormant in these conditions, they wouldn't wake up. Daniel had managed to inch closer over the past few minutes, still humming that same tune. Now, he sat maybe 4 feet from them, close enough to see the tiny frost crystals forming on their downy feathers. His jacket lay between them, offered but rejected. They were too scared to take anything from him. "Come on, little ones," he whispered. "I know I'm scary. I get it, but you'll die if you stay over there." One of them, the smallest, made a sound, barely a chirp, weak and fading. Its siblings pressed closer to it, trying to share warmth they didn't have. Daniel watched their breathing slow further. He was out of time. Daniel pulled off his gloves and outer shirt, leaving just a thin thermal undershirt. The cold bit into his skin immediately, raising goosebumps across his arms. He took a breath, then moved quickly, not aggressive, but purposeful. He scooped up all 3 hatchlings in one smooth motion, pulling them against his chest. They exploded into panic. Tiny talons dug into his skin, drawing blood. Their beaks opened in silent screams. No energy left for sound. They thrashed and writhed, trying to escape the predator that had finally grabbed them. Daniel wrapped his arms around them and held on. Not tight enough to hurt, but firm enough that they couldn't break free and scatter. He pulled his jacket over all of them, creating a dark, enclosed space. Then he started humming again, louder now, right above where their heads pressed against his sternum. "I've got you. I've got you. You're safe." It took 5 minutes for the fight to leave them. They didn't relax. Not really, but their struggling stopped. Daniel could feel their rapid heartbeats against his ribs, frantic little pulses. He stayed perfectly still except for the steady rise and fall of his breathing, that endless humming tune. Then he felt it. One of the hatchlings shifted slightly, burrowing closer to his skin, not fleeing, seeking. The warmth of his body, still running at a solid 98.6 degrees despite the freezing room, was impossible for them to resist. The other 2 followed within minutes. They crawled upward inside the jacket, found the space between his undershirt and skin, and pressed themselves there. Their feathers were so soft it almost tickled. Their tiny bodies fit perfectly in the hollow below his collarbones. 3 small lives tucked against his chest. Daniel carefully pulled his outer shirt back on over the jacket, creating layers of insulation. He could feel them settling, their heartbeats beginning to slow to something more normal. The panicked panting steadied. One of them made a small chirping sound, muffled against his skin. "There we go," he breathed. "That's better, isn't it?" The temperature kept dropping. Daniel's own body started shivering, an automatic response he couldn't control. But every time he shivered, the hatchlings stirred restlessly, disturbed. He forced himself to breathe slowly, deeply, keeping his core temperature up while minimizing movement. His rescue training had covered hypothermia, but it had never covered keeping yourself warm enough to heat 3 alien babies while slowly freezing that he could do the math in his head. His body heat was finite. The room would keep getting colder. Eventually, his metabolism would start shutting down too. But humans were death worlders. They could survive conditions that would kill most species in this station. If he rationed his warmth carefully, kept the hatchlings alive, maybe rescue would come before his own body gave out. The yellow gas had stopped seeping through the vents an hour ago. The immediate danger had passed, but the station's systems were still down. How long before someone organized search parties? How long before they checked the nursery? Would they even think to look, or would they assume everyone had evacuated successfully? Daniel's radio had died completely. No way to signal, no way to call for help. Just him and three tiny aliens who still trembled against his chest every time he moved that he talked to them. Softly, continuously, filling the dark silence. He told them about Earth, about oceans they would never understand and forests that would seem alien to their bird-like minds. He told them about his mother, about learning to sing, about the reason he came to the stars in the first place. Running from ghosts, from failure. I couldn't save them, he whispered into the darkness. The people in that building. I tried so hard, but I was too slow, too weak. And I've thought about that every single day since. When the hatchlings shifted, pressing closer. Not understanding the words, but perhaps feeling the pain in them. But I can save you three. I can do that much. I promise. His eyes grew heavy. The cold was making him drowsy, dangerous for someone facing hypothermia. He forced them open, focused on staying awake. If he fell asleep, he might roll over, might crush them, might never wake up. But as the hours crawled past and exhaustion pulled at him like a physical weight, Daniel found his mind drifting. The hatchlings had stopped shivering. Their breathing was deep and steady, peaceful. They trusted him now, completely, instinctively. Three small lives depending on his promise, his eyes closed. Just for a moment, he told himself, just to rest them. The last thing Daniel felt before darkness took him was the gentle rise and fall of three tiny heartbeats against his own. Lissa couldn't breathe properly. The evacuation shelter pressed in around her, packed with too many bodies of too many species, but all she could feel was the crushing absence of her hatchlings. Beside her, Harik kept making clicking sounds deep in his throat, a Valorian stress response he couldn't control. They'll be found, someone said behind them, well-meaning words that meant nothing. The emergency had been contained 2 hours ago. The coolant leak sealed, the gas dispersed, the danger passed. But the nursery attendant had never made it to shelter. No one knew if the hatchlings had been evacuated with another group or if they were still in there. Still in that section where the gas had been thickest. It was a human, Harik said suddenly, his voice harsh. The security feed before it went dark. A human breached the nursery door. Lissa felt ice form in her chest. She had seen Daniel Reed on his patrols, kept her distance like every reasonable parent did. Humans were deathworlders. Strong, aggressive, evolved from hunters. You didn't let them near your children. We don't know what happened, she managed to say. Don't we? Harik's crest flared. Everyone knows what they're capable of. Station Administrator Kell's voice crackled over the shelter speakers. Attention all residents. Search and rescue teams are now entering the affected areas. Please remain calm while we account for all personnel. The waiting was torture. Lissa pressed against the shelter wall, her claws scraping the metal. Around her, other Valorians murmured comfort to each other, but their eyes said what their voices wouldn't. Three hatchlings, alone with a human. There was only one way that story ended. That 45 minutes later, Kell's voice returned. Rescue teams have reached the residential sector. We are conducting room-by-room searches. Harik grabbed Lissa's wing. I can't wait here. I can't. They pushed through the crowd, ignoring the protests. The shelter doors were still sealed, but Kell met them there, his compound eyes reflecting the red emergency lights. Please, Lissa said. Our hatchlings. Something in Kell's posture made her stomach drop. The team has reached the nursery. They're cutting through the door now. I think you should come with me. They ran through corridors still hazy with residual gas. Their respirators fogged with each breath. Other parents joined them, a growing crowd of terrified families. Ahead, bright work lights marked where the rescue team had set up. A human woman stood at the nursery entrance. Dr. Reina Okoye, the human physician who worked in the medical bay. She saw them coming and held up her hands. Wait, before you go in, you need to understand what you're going to see. Where are my children? Lissa demanded. They're alive. Dr. Okoye said it quickly, firmly. All three are alive and healthy. But Daniel is hypothermic and unresponsive. My team is working on him now. Harik pushed past her. Lissa followed, her heart's pounding so hard it hurt. The nursery was freezing, their breath visible in clouds. Rescue workers crowded around something in the corner. Medical equipment beeped steadily. Then the crowd parted. Daniel sat slumped against the wall, his face pale as death. Two medics worked on him, wrapping heated blankets, checking vital signs. But that wasn't what made Lissa stop. Breathing point, three small gray heads poked out from inside Daniel's shirt. Pip, Trill, and Whisper, she knew them instantly. Knew their exact patterns, the tiny variations in their downy feathers. They blinked sleepily at the bright lights, making confused, chirping sounds. They were warm, alert, alive. "We can't move them yet," one of the medics said. "They're too comfortable, and disturbing them might worsen his condition. His body temperature is dangerously low. We think he's been keeping them warm for hours." Lissa moved forward slowly, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. Daniel's eyes flickered open as she approached. His lips moved, barely a whisper. "Are they okay? Please, tell me they're okay." The smallest hatchling, Whisper, chirped happily at the sound of his voice. She nuzzled against his chest, completely content. "They're perfect," Lissa heard herself say. "You saved them." Daniel's eyes closed again. The medics started carefully extracting the hatchlings, moving them to a heated carrier. Each one protested, chirping and reaching back toward Daniel with their tiny talons. They didn't want to leave him. Harik stood frozen, staring. Other Valorians crowded the doorway, watching in silence. This wasn't possible. This wasn't how the story was supposed to go. Humans were dangerous. Humans were aggressive. Humans didn't sacrifice themselves for alien children. Dr. Okoye worked efficiently, directing her team. "Get him to medical now. We need to raise his core temperature slowly. And someone figure out how to explain this to the rest of the station." They lifted Daniel onto a stretcher. As they carried him past, Lissa reached out without thinking, touched his cold hand. His fingers twitched slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for my babies." The crowd in the corridor parted as they brought Daniel out. Word had spread fast. Dozens of aliens lined the walls, watching the unconscious human pass. Some looked confused. Some looked guilty. All of them looked shaken. The hatchlings chirped constantly, their sounds echoing down the corridor. They had been separated from their new protector, and they wanted everyone to know they were unhappy about it. Station Administrator Kell stood at the medical bay entrance. He watched as they rushed Daniel inside, then turned to face the growing crowd. "I think," he said slowly, "we need to have a station-wide conversation about humans." Harik finally moved, his legs carrying him to where Lissa held their hatchlings. He touched each one gently, checking them over with shaking hands. All three were perfect, unharmed, trusting. He could have left them, Harik said quietly. He could have saved himself. Lissa looked at the medical bay doors, where humans and aliens worked together to save the man who had proven every prejudice wrong. But he didn't, she said. Daniel woke to the sterile smell of the medical bay and an overwhelming sense that something was wrong. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Every muscle in his body screamed protest. "Easy." Dr. Okoye appeared beside his bed, gently pushing him back down. "You've been out for 18 hours. Your body temperature dropped to dangerous levels. You're lucky to be alive." Memory flooded back. The nursery, the cold, the hatchlings pressed against his chest. "The babies," he croaked. "Did they make it?" Raina smiled. "All three are perfectly healthy. Better than healthy, actually. You kept them at optimal temperature the entire time. Though I have to say, that's possibly the most inefficient heating system I've ever seen." Relief washed through him so strongly that his eyes burned. "Good. That's good. What you did was incredibly stupid," Raina continued, but her voice was soft. "Also incredibly brave. The entire station is talking about it." Daniel closed his eyes. "I don't want them to talk about it. I just want to go back to work. That's going to be difficult. You're kind of famous now." Over the next 2 days, Daniel discovered she wasn't joking. His hospital room had a viewing window, and there was almost always someone standing there. Aliens he had never met, staring at him like he was a museum exhibit. Some nodded respectfully. Others just watched with unreadable expressions. The hatchlings were the worst part, or the best part. Daniel couldn't decide. They were brought to visit him every few hours because apparently they wouldn't stop crying otherwise. The moment they heard his voice, they would calm down, chirping happily. Lissa seemed bewildered by this. Harik looked like he was trying to solve an impossible equation. They shouldn't be this bonded to you, Lissa said on the third day, watching her babies climb over Daniel's bed covers. Valorian hatchlings imprint on their flock, not on strangers. Certainly not on other species. Daniel carefully moved his hand so Whisper could perch on his finger. Her tiny talons gripped gently, and she made a contented, trilling sound. Maybe they just remember being warm, he suggested. No, Harik spoke from the doorway, his crest slightly raised. Dr. Okoye explained it to us. Human biochemistry. When you protect something, care for something, your body releases chemicals. Bonding hormones. The hatchlings would have sensed that you chose to protect them. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. I owe you an apology, Harik continued, moving into the room. I thought the worst of you. When I heard a human had breached the nursery, I assumed you had taken them. To hurt them. I was wrong. You weren't wrong to be cautious, Daniel said quietly. Humans can be dangerous. You were just protecting your family by assuming you would harm them instead of die for them. Harik's voice carried an edge of shame. The station administrator wants to hold a forum to discuss human integration. There are many who think this changes things. Daniel felt his stomach drop. I don't want to be part of some political thing. I just did what anyone would do. That's where you're wrong, Lissa said softly. Most species wouldn't. We care for our own young, fiercely. But another species' children? There's no evolutionary reason to risk your life for them. It's not logical. It wasn't about logic. We know. That's what makes it significant. They left shortly after, taking the reluctant hatchlings with them. Daniel lay in his hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't asked to be a symbol, hadn't asked to be the example that proved humans weren't monsters. He just wanted to be left alone. But over the following days, he noticed changes. Small ones at first. A Quiller shopkeeper who used to track him with suspicious eyes now nodded in greeting. A family of tall, crystalline beings let their children approach him in the corridor, watching carefully but not intervening. Word had spread beyond those who witnessed the rescue. The story had taken on a life of its own. Not everyone was happy about it. The first threatening message arrived on his datapad a week after he left medical care. Anonymous, of course. Short and direct. Deathworlders don't belong near our children. This changes nothing. More followed. Some accused him of manipulation, of using the hatchlings to gain trust. Others claimed he had caused the emergency himself just to play hero. A few were simply hateful, filled with species-based slurs that Daniel had heard before but never quite got used to. Station Administrator Kell called him in for a private meeting. There's going to be a forum, Kell said without preamble. Too many voices demanding it. Some want to expand human participation in station life. Others want you specifically restricted from family areas. I don't want to testify or whatever, Daniel said. I'm not a politician. I'm not asking you to speak. But you need to be there. Your presence matters, whether you like it or not. The forum was scheduled for the following week. Daniel tried to continue his normal routines, but normal had shifted. Families sought him out now, asking about Earth, about humans, about his experience. He answered as best he could, uncomfortable with the attention. The hatchlings visited daily. They were growing, developing the first hints of color in their feathers. Pip showed green undertones, Trill had blue, and Whisper was developing purple highlights. They recognized Daniel from across a room now, would call out in excitement when they saw him. Lissa and Harik started staying longer during visits, sharing meals, talking about their lives, their culture. Daniel found himself learning Valorian customs, understanding their flock-based society. In return, he told them about Earth, about human families, about the strange way humans could bond with anything that needed protecting. It's not just babies, he explained. Humans adopt animals. Plants, even robots, if they interact with them long enough. We have this weird need to nurture things. That's a dangerous trait, Harik observed. Maybe, Daniel agreed. But it's also what makes us human. The main forum chamber was designed to accommodate all species equally, which meant it was uncomfortable for everyone. Daniel stood at the back, trying to make himself invisible. It didn't work. Eyes from a dozen different species tracked him as he entered. The chamber filled quickly. Station Administrator Kell took his position at the center podium, his insectoid features betraying no emotion. To his left sat a group of aliens Daniel didn't recognize, their postures rigid and hostile. To his right, Dr. Okoye, and several others who had spoken in support of increased human integration. This forum, Kell began, has been called to address the question of human participation in station life, particularly regarding proximity to families and children. Recent events have brought this matter to urgent attention. A tall being from the left group stood immediately. Daniel recognized the species, Korthan, known for their rigid adherence to tradition and hierarchy. Recent events have proven nothing, the Korthan said, his translator rendering his clicks into flat words. One human acted against type. This does not change the fundamental nature of Deathworlders. They remain dangerous, unpredictable, and unsuitable for childcare or family proximity. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Daniel felt his face heat. Another alien stood. This one, a Valorian Daniel, didn't know. My flock agrees. Humans have only been on this station for 3 years. 3 years is nothing against millennia of evolution that made them apex predators. We cannot risk our young based on one anomalous incident. It wasn't anomalous. Dr. Okoye stood, her voice carrying clearly. Daniel Reed's actions were completely consistent with human psychology. Humans evolved to protect helpless young, even beyond their own species. It's documented behavior going back thousands of years. They domesticated animals, raised orphans from other tribes, created social structures specifically to care for vulnerable members of their communities. They also created weapons that could destroy their own planet, the Korthan shot back. They have a history of warfare, of violence, of conquest. Every species in this room has that history, Dr. Okoye replied. The Korthan Empire conquered 40 systems before joining the galactic community. The Valorians had clan wars that lasted centuries. Violence isn't unique to humans, but our capacity for compassion might be unique in its scope. The debate continued, voices rising. Daniel wanted to leave, to escape the scrutiny. But then he saw Lissa and Harik enter with their 3 hatchlings. The babies chirped excitedly, scanning the crowd. When they spotted Daniel, all 3 started calling to him, their voices cutting through the argument. The chamber fell silent. Lissa moved to the speaker's position, carrying Whisper, while Pip and Trill rode on Harik's shoulders. Every eye in the room watched them. I didn't want to speak today, Lissa said quietly. I'm not comfortable with crowds, but I need to say something. She looked directly at the Korthan representative. You say humans are dangerous. You're right. Daniel Reed is one of the strongest beings on this station. His physical capabilities exceed most species here. He could have hurt my hatchlings easily. The hostile group nodded, vindicated, but he didn't. Lissa continued. He nearly died, keeping them alive. And when they found him hypothermic and barely conscious, his first words were asking if my babies were okay. Not himself. Them. Harik stepped forward, his crest fully displayed. I hated humans before this. I believed every story about Deathworlder aggression. When I heard a human had breached the nursery, I was certain my children were dead or worse. His voice cracked slightly. Finding them alive, warm, protected by the very being I'd feared most, it broke something in me. A prejudice I didn't even know was controlling my thoughts. Personal testimony is irrelevant, another voice called out. Individual experiences don't determine policy. Then look at the data, Dr. Okoye interjected. Since the incident, 17 families have requested Daniel specifically for emergency contact lists. 43 children of various species have approached him voluntarily. Not one negative interaction has been reported. Because they're following a trend, the Korthan said. Social pressure to appear accepting. Daniel had heard enough. He moved forward before he could stop himself, and the crowd parted. He reached the speaker's area, feeling exposed under the lights. I didn't ask to be here, he said. I didn't ask to be your example or your controversy. I saw children who needed help, and I helped them. That's it. That's precisely the problem, the Korthan replied. You acted without authorization, violated protocol, risked station security. Your emotional response overrode logic and procedure. Daniel met his eyes, all 4 of them. Yes, it did. Because sometimes being alive means more than following rules. Those hatchlings would have died if I had followed protocol. You couldn't have known that. I knew they needed help. That was enough. Whisper squirmed in Lissa's arms, reaching toward Daniel. Without thinking, he took her, and she immediately settled against his shoulder, chirping contentedly. The simple gesture said more than any speech could. Kel stood again. This forum will vote in 3 days. Until then, I encourage everyone to examine not just their fears, but their reasons for those fears. Are we protecting our families, or are we teaching them to hate? The crowd began to disperse, but many lingered, watching Daniel with the hatchling. Some approached cautiously, asking questions. Others left quickly, their disapproval clear. Harik touched Daniel's arm. Whatever happens, you should know that you're welcome in our flock. Always. Lissa nodded. Our children chose you. In Valorian culture, that means something. Daniel looked at the tiny creature nestled against his neck, trusting him completely. 3 days until the vote. 3 days to decide if one human's actions could change decades of fear. He just hoped it would be enough. The 3 days before the vote felt like 3 years. Daniel went about his duties, but everything was different now. Children waved at him in corridors. Parents nodded in greeting. But he also noticed the cold stares, the way some families hurried past, the anonymous messages that kept appearing on his datapad. The morning of the vote, Daniel stood in his quarters, staring at his reflection. He looked tired. The past weeks had worn him down in ways the cold nursery hadn't. He wasn't built for politics, for being a symbol. He was just a security guard who had made a choice at a soft chime at his door. Lissa stood outside with all 3 hatchlings. They were noticeably bigger now, their colors becoming more vibrant each day. They wanted to see you before the vote, she said. They get restless when you're not around. Daniel let them in. The hatchlings immediately scattered across his quarters, exploring with the fearless curiosity of young things who felt safe. Pip discovered Daniel's collection of Earth photos and chirped at them excitedly. Trill found his boots and tried to nest in one. Whisper climbed directly up his leg and settled on his shoulder, her favorite spot. How are you feeling? Lissa asked. Honestly, I want this to be over. Whatever they decide, I just want to know. Harik and I will speak today. Really speak. We've been talking to other families, gathering support. You have more allies than you think. Daniel watched Pip try to climb a shelf, his tiny talons slipping. He caught the hatchling before he fell, and Pip trilled happily, completely unaware of any danger. They trust so easily, Daniel said. Doesn't that scare you? What if I'd been the monster everyone thought I was? But you weren't. That's the point. Lissa gathered her children carefully. Trust has to start somewhere. They started it. Now we continue it. The forum chamber was even more packed than before. Daniel spotted aliens he had never seen on the station, visitors who had come specifically for this vote. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Station Administrator Kel called the session to order. We will hear final testimonies, then vote on the measure to expand human participation in station life and remove current proximity restrictions around family areas. The Corthan representative spoke first, reiterating his position. Humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable. One positive incident didn't erase evolutionary reality. Several others echoed his concerns, their arguments logical and measured. Then Harik took the podium. I was wrong, he said simply. I taught my hatchlings to fear humans. I told them stories about Deathworlders, about violence and aggression. I believed I was protecting them. He paused, his crest rising. But when they were dying in that nursery, it wasn't their own kind who saved them. It wasn't the species I had told them to trust. It was the one I had told them to fear. Lissa joined him, her voice steady. Valorian wisdom says that actions reveal character. Daniel Reed's actions revealed someone who values life above his own safety. Someone who saw children in danger and responded with protection, not harm. If we cannot acknowledge that, then what are we teaching our own children? More testimonies followed. A Quiller engineer whose child had been trapped in another section during the evacuation, rescued by Daniel's quick thinking. A family of crystalline beings whose youngest had been injured, and Daniel had stayed with them until medical help arrived. Story after story of small kindnesses, quiet acts that no one had publicized. Dr. Okoye presented data. Crime statistics showing human involvement in incidents was below the station average. Psychological profiles demonstrating human capacity for empathy and cooperation. Medical records proving that Daniel's hypothermia had been life-threatening, that he had truly risked everything. The opposition presented their rebuttals, but their arguments felt thinner now, less certain. Finally, Kel called for the vote. all in favor of expanding human participation and removing current restrictions. The chamber lit up with voting indicators. Green for yes, red for no. Daniel watched the board fill with colors, his heart pounding. The green outnumbered the red. Not overwhelmingly, but clearly. The measure passes, Kell announced. Effective immediately, humans are granted full participation in all station activities. Restrictions are lifted. The chamber erupted. Some cheered, some protested, most simply talked among themselves. Daniel felt numb. He had won, but didn't feel like victory. It felt like he could finally breathe after weeks of holding his breath. People surrounded him, some congratulating, some asking questions. Daniel answered automatically, his mind elsewhere. Then the crowd parted, and Lissa and Harik approached with the hatchlings. We discussed it, Harik said, and we want to offer you something. In Valorian culture, when someone saves a flock member's life, they become part of the flock. Honorari, but permanent. Lissa held out a small braided band, made from what looked like woven feathers. This is a flock marker. It means your family. It means our children are your children, and you are under our protection as we are under yours. Daniel took the band with shaking hands. I don't know what to say. Say you'll visit, Lissa said gently. Say you'll let them continue to know you. They chose you, Daniel. Let us choose you too. 3 months later, Daniel walked his patrol route through the residential sector. A group of children played in the corridor, multiple species mixed together. When they saw him, several ran up, chattering about their day. Their parents watched from nearby, relaxed and smiling. Pip, Trill, and Whisper had their own quarters now in Lissa and Harik's family unit, but they spent most evenings in Daniel's rooms. A nest he had built sat in the corner, modified from human bedding and Valorian design. Photos covered his walls, documenting their growth. Daniel's radio crackled. Read, we have a situation in Sector 4. Family with younglings needs assistance. On my way, Daniel responded. Already moving, he passed a mirror in the corridor, catching his reflection. The flock marker was braided into his hair now, a permanent reminder. He wasn't just security anymore. He was family. He was trusted that he was home.